Welcome to the Home Assistant Podcast, episode number 6. Joining me is Phil and Paulus. Hey guys.
Hey, how's it going?
Thanks for joining me as always, and also thanks to our listeners for coming along. And we've actually been receiving a decent amount of good feedback from everyone, so that's good. We do appreciate your, kind words of thanks, this is interesting, and things like that. Especially the recent episode with Carlo. I think that's really inspired a lot of people, including myself. I now have Android tablets on my wall.
Yeah,
My wife.
He's a very good salesman for a lot of things, and I'm also sold. I'm just waiting to decide on the hardware I'm going to use for those tablets as well.
Yeah, my wife got home from 2 weeks away to go, what are all these tablets doing on the walls? Oops. Right, so our headline topic this week is voice and intents, and that's why Paulus is here, because he wanted to come in and talk about it, because it is a pretty darn exciting feature.
Yeah, so intents is something that we released in version 50 2 weeks ago, and intents is kind of allowing, to build the next level of components and functionality into Home Assistant. So before intents, we had devices, and devices would be exposed by components via services. And services were really like the lowest level of control that a user can do. And these services would just provide like, hey, turn this on, turn this off, set the temperature. But then the voice assistants came in, and so we had the Amazon Echo and we had the Google Home. And these provide, they use intents, and an intent is like a user intention to do something. But we kind of had this disconnect where we had intents directly mapped to services and to scripts without allowing component developers to actually put some, real handling of the voice, like real handling of the intent with some more functionality in place. And so with this new layer of intent in Home Assistant, we can actually start building applications on top of Home Assistant. So one example that we introduced with the launch of intent was a shopping list.
Yeah, the shopping list, that looked great.
Yeah, and so if we'll use the Google Home or the Amazon Echo, you can configure intents for a shopping list, and you can map it to the shopping list component in Home Assistant. Or if you are just using the voice UI inside the Home Assistant front end, which we have also updated to show responses, you can actually also interact from the front end and directly add things to your shopping list.
So in theory, if you had a Google Home, Amazon Echo, and the Home Assistant front end, you could tell all three devices to add something to your shopping list, and it would all go to the same shopping list in Home Assistant. Is that right?
The only thing,
Yeah, perfect.
so the only difference from the perspective of like the shopping list application or the component, for example, so the shopping list component can automatically configure the voice assistant in the front end to listen for the sentences and convert it to an intent. When it comes to the Alexa or Google Home, you will have to create a skill that generates those intents and then send those to Home Assistant.
Yeah, right, which you have to do at the moment. I believe even before this, you'd had to create a skill, set up your sentences and your utterances, and then push them through the Home Assistant that way.
Yeah, and that is still very cumbersome, and it's kind of difficult to actually get started with these things to get, because you have to set up port forwarding.
Yeah.
Amazon Echo, you have to register like a developer account and have a Lambda function. And it's not very accessible yet for the average user to like start adding utterances to their, to allow the Amazon Echo to actually understand what you're saying and convert it to an intent.
Mm.
We had some better experience with Snips, because Snips you configure it in their web UI, but then you can download it to your computer, and like inside Hash.io, we can launch Snips with a single click. So that made it easier, but I think the easiest one is just the front end right now inside the Home Assistant user interface. The only downside right now is that it's all English. So we use the Google Chrome speech to text or like it's actually a web standard, but I haven't actually tested it in other browsers than Google Chrome. But we should be able. I saw that Safari has it too, and they also browsers will support different languages. So because right now the Home Assistant UI will only listen to you in English, and we are actually looking into also making support for whatever the browser can support that we can support in the UI. So listen in German, listen in French, or whatever support there is.
Yeah.
That means that someone has to add listen and Klingon support as well.
Yeah, and this is actually also like a longer term thing that we're working on is just localization, right? Like it's been requested like a lot of times, and a lot of people have suggested like, hey, I will translate this for you, the Home Assistant UI in this language and in this language. But the problem is we had to, the user interface has to be like re-architected, because every time where we printed like a piece of text, it now has to look like, hey, which text which language has the user has picked, then combine it with what is the piece of text that I want to print, then check, do we have a translation for that piece of text in the language that we need to print? If not, then fall back to English.
Yeah.
But actually Adam Mills is working on this. So we were,
Also, it is actually being worked on actively.
yes, we had
Nice.
a proof of concept a couple of months ago, but at that point in time, I told them to shelve it because I first wanted to upgrade the Home Assistant front end to use the Polymer 2 technology. But that has been released today at Home Assistant 51.
Yeah, so there was massive updates to the configuration panel as well. It looks like you've reorganized, so you've put all the like Z-Wave and all the extra automation panels just inside that one configuration area now.
Yeah, and this was a bigger redesign. I had it in mind for a longer period of time, and the reason I wanted to reorganize this is that now it's kind of in a way where we can scale it to many configuration panels, because you click on configuration, you get to like a menu, and the menu way there's automation editor, and then there's the old, I call it now configuration.yaml. I might still tweak that to like core or general or something. But yeah, so I think a script editor is going to be added soon, because that's pretty much a subset of the automation editor.
They're very similar now, scripts and automations, with their actions. So, most of the stuff that you can do in scripts, you can also do in your action triggers. So it makes sense that you'll be able to edit scripts inline as well now too.
Yeah, no, they're exactly the same. They both use the script syntax. And we are, any other component that we have that supports reloading of configuration on the fly could be eventually added to the configuration panel to make it all easier to use and configure.
And so that's all using the Polymer 2 now. So I think there's some speed increases as well by upgrading.
There's definitely a speed increase. So Polymer 1 had to do some workarounds for certain browsers, including Safari and Safari on iOS. And these workarounds are gone. So they migrated to using a new web standard called Web Components v1. And by having Safari on iOS run this natively, it means that all of a sudden every iPhone running Home Assistant front end becomes a lot faster.
Hooray.
Beautiful. And so actually some more speed improvements. There's the history component with the all the graphs and stuff. I just upgraded to 5.1 this morning, and just viewing the history has been so much faster now.
Yeah, Greg Labs, he did an amazing job where he looked at all the different queries that we are doing to show the history in the front end. And then he looked at the indexes that we had, and he analyzed the different queries, and he's been optimizing them. And now it's just, he managed to get them all super fast.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, so the only downside is that we have this migration. So if you have a big database and you upgrade to 51, it might take a while. And this is something that we couldn't finish in time. And I wish we had was that right now the front end doesn't show up while the migration is running. And this means that you might think that your Home Assistant is broken and you might like end up restarting Home Assistant or turning your Pi off. Don't do it because it might break your database.
Yeah. Yeah, if the queries stop halfway through, it's not going to end well for anyone.
Yeah.
I actually did this morning, and I've had a lot of trouble with the database being really slow. I'm on a MySQL server. But the update, I was expecting it to take, 15, 20 minutes, went away. But no, they didn't even have any extra time added at all. Home Assistant booted up very quickly, so I was very impressed.
Nice.
Do we know what percentage of the user base actually use the history component? I actually have mine turned off because I'm pushing everything into Prometheus.
I think a lot of people will have it turned on because it's turned on by default. But the downside with using something like Prometheus is that there's no nice integration into Home Assistant. So when you click an entity, you don't see the history from Prometheus. You can only see the recorder history.
Yeah.
That's actually something I was thinking about the other day. Is like, how can we allow other components to also plug into, like, being the history provider, or at least show up on the dialog that pops up with the information about an entity. Right now, we just have some extended control and maybe some extended information about an entity. But it would be great if, we had different kind of tabs where, Prometheus could, for example, or Grafana could show some graphs or show some ways to interact or see what they've learned about that entity based on the history.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic. And just going back to speaking of Safari, previously the automation editor's kind of been finished off and now also supports Safari. I presume a lot of that's come from the Polymer 2 upgrade, has it?
Yes. So the Polymer 2 upgrade, because there's no longer a workaround, Safari, it will just work with Safari. And that was actually almost like a freebie from the Polymer 2 upgrade. Nice. And now, but then because it was working in Safari, we decided to also just add all the missing conditions and triggers and actions. We support all the basic things for all these options. So, for example, the state trigger, we do not support configuring the for option yet. So you can have a state automation trigger if a certain state has been set for 10 minutes, for example. You cannot configure it yet through the automation editor. But if you have an automation that uses it and you have set it through YAML, you can still edit the other parts of the automation. It will not throw it away. It will keep it up.
Good.
Excellent.
Because I've always been worried about using that editor to make a quick change, but I'm like, what if it destroys some YAML that I've got in there? I'm always a bit worried. I don't want to lose that automation when saving.
Yeah, no, we try to not destroy anything because that would be the worst. Like, the idea of the automation editor is that we can start incrementally support more of your configuration through editing. And as long as, because we're not going to support everything at once or maybe even ever. So we put a lot of effort into making sure that it's just incremental and we're not throwing away any of the configuration.
And so we're talking about voice before. Another little voice enhancement that I saw come through on the release notes is the Alexa Intense support. I know people with Google Home, Google Home has the ability to add shortcuts, so you can say, okay, Google, good night, and have Home Assistant shut everything down for you. But this one, it sounds like now you can do something like Alexa, good night, and have her fire off a script in Home Assistant. So I'm really excited. Steve Rhodes contributed that, so I'm really excited to test this one out as well. That could be a good way to sort of level the playing field with, you've got both a Google Home and an Amazon Echo in the house. I actually really love the sample one. It's if you're familiar with Star Trek, you can actually say computer red alert and have your Home Assistant fire off something without having to say, Alexa, tell Home Assistant to do something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that like the voice integration, also the Amazon Echo and the Google Home, these products, they are still being developed, and it's not like with mobile phones where like, oh, your mobile phone is 2 years old, like forget about it. I feel the main interface is a voice, and the microphone is not going to change that much. And so it will be great. They will be able to keep just adding new features even to the older Amazon Echoes, and so anyone can benefit.
So is there anything else you wanted to cover off about voice before we move on?
Not for me.
No.
All right, so the 0.51 release. Phil, you have a question.
I do. So we just had the 0.50 release, and now 0.51. Paulus, do you see Home Assistant ever being at a version 1.0?
Ooh. So actually, I'm not sure if we want to just do a 1.0, or that we just. I was also thinking, because we always talk about the numbers, version 49, version 50. And so when I saw another project do, it's called React. They used to have like 29 or something, and then no, they had like 13, and then they went to 14. And so maybe we will just go to like version 52 or 53 eventually. I think that people put in a lot of they think that like, version 1, then we're going to be stable, and we're going to, everything is done to a certain level. But I think with home automation and new devices entering the markets, and even whole new concepts like the voice assistant, right, that didn't exist when we started the home assistant, I find it very difficult, like, what will be version 1? And calling something version 1 is kind of an easy thing to do, but then when is it going to be version 2? Are we then just going to be like 1.50 at some point?
Yeah, and then how do you define what is a big enough leap to call it, a version 1 to version 2? Or what's a 1.5 release like?
Yeah. The only thing that's kind of confusing right now is that Hash.io, their releases, they just released 51 as well. So now it's kind of confusing, because Hash.io, the system of Hash.io has its own version numbering, but it's the same with Home Assistant right now.
And I think the same with
So
AppDaemon or any of the other sort of little satellite projects going around as well now. They all might have different version numbers.
yeah. And so yeah, I don't know. We thought about also like Hash.io, should it be 1.0 when we released it? And I think in the end, I think a lot of people just they put a lot of value in a version number, but I actually myself, I don't really. So maybe the next release will just be 52, and then I think Chrome does a similar thing. I think Chrome is around 58 now.
Yeah.
Every 6 do a major release as well. So we might stick with that.
Sounds excellent.
Yeah, and I think because if there's a version 1, like, is there anything that I wish we had today? Like, internationalization is nice to have. Having maybe more configuration editor UI is nice to have. But I think the base system of home automation is all about of home assistant is all about the automation, and that has been solid for a long time.
And it's just like a project that'll never get done, You could constantly be pushing back that, we can't say it's version 1 until we've got this, or, next month a new product will come out. Oh, we can't say version 1 until we have this feature in. So it makes sense that I think you're right. Like, eventually Home Assistant will just become, instead of 0.50, it'll be 50, Home Assistant 50 or 51.
Yeah, and I think once you go high enough, people will kind of not expect it that like a 2.0 is going to happen. Like, if it's just like, hey, we're version 50, people are like, oh yeah, version 80, it's just going to be more features or bug fixes.
Yeah, what happens when you get to 99? You're going to go to 0.100, because that then starts breaking some rules as well with
Oh, we
numbers.
had this problem before when we hit version 0.9. People were like, oh, now we're going to hit 1.0, and they were like, no, we're going to be 0.10. But yeah, because right now we are not using the first. It's always 0 dot, so we might as well just cut it off.
Yeah. More things in release 5.1. The vacuum component. I'm quite excited to see that, even though in this house at least we'll never have a robot vacuum because there's too many levels. Just little steps up into rooms and things, which means that we'd need like 10 robot vacuums.
I do like that they're becoming so popular now that it needs a component because there's so many different varieties of them.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to see it. I think that's kind of a sign to say, hey, this set of things is now important enough that we've got a whole component for it.
I think a big driver here has also been that all these vacuum cleaners have been rapidly improving their functionality. So it used to be that there was Roomba and then there was Nito, and they kind of got more competition from like Xiaomi, the Chinese manufacturer. And the competition is like lower the prices, has increased the functionality. So now we all can like on our mobile phone look at the map that the vacuum cleaner has made of your house. These kind of cool functionalities.
And now there's the new Dyson vacuum cleaner is now supported in Home Assistant.
It's kind of really mainstream, isn't it? Dyson's kind of the gold standard for vacuum cleaners almost. I think robot vacuums are kind of one of the things that when you watch movies with future, like looking into the future, one of them is your house cleans itself while you're not at home, and this is the first step.
Yeah, well, in my experience, it doesn't the automatic scheduling doesn't work for me because the floors need to be kind of clean. So, for example, I had my Mac charger was laying on the floor, and then the vacuum would turn on, and I would come home, and it would have like eaten my whole charger.
I used to have an old Samsung vacuum cleaner that would get stuck under the TV cabinet, and just once it's stuck and it doesn't know how to get out, that's it. You've got to then go find it.
Yeah, I have experienced that one too. And so right now I have to, before I turn it on, I turn it on when I leave the house, but we first have to do like scan everything to see that there's nothing that it can eat. So the automatic cleaning my house is not there yet.
That's hilarious. I like that. Yeah, technology eating other technology. Next thing that we've got here on the list is the Shodan sensor. So for those that don't know, Shodan is the Internet of Things discovery thing that it does scans of the internet. Basically, as crazy as that sounds.
Great for finding out people that have still got the default username and password set on their Wi-Fi camera, and you'd like to just see what they're up to.
Yes, there's every 6 months or so there'll be a major news story about how the hackers are breaking into people's cameras and watching them sleep. I swear it happens every 6 months, and this is often the tool that people use. And the example on the docs page is a query for Home Assistant. So you can do a query for that and go, well, here's all the people that have their Home Assistant open to the internet, hopefully with a password set.
Hopefully.
I haven't actually had a look to see if there are any wide open to the internet.
And another one was the mailbox component.
Yeah, I think Paulus wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, so the nice thing about the mailbox component is that it's one of the few components that actually has also implemented a panel. And so with the, it has actually a front-end part to it. And this is actually becoming more a trend, just like the shopping list is where, we're starting to get components that, instead of like implementing devices, they're kind of implementing mini application, which, in this case does interact with devices because it interacts with the Asterisk voicemail platform. But yeah, I think it's a great addition because it, shows more developers what kind of components people can build, what kind of integrations. So I thought that was a really nice addition.
Yeah, it's good to see more front-end components as well. At the moment, we're just used to a lot of state cards that can just, give us information, but new interactive cards that come out with new features are great, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's the vacuum cleaner is another good example there. Actually, the vacuum cleaner has a whole UI, like a more info page, the modal that shows up when you tap on an entity, with like all the advanced controls right there for you.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things about, well, my style of development at least, is that I need examples because I'm not fantastic at Python especially, but if, for example, with the mailbox component, someone's gone and created a panel, then I can go, well, there's all your code, so I'm just going to pick it up and modify it to make it do what I want. That seems to be my style of Python coding. Yeah, same with AppDaemon. Andrew kindly created an example for me for something that I wanted to do with it, which was to add a countdown to my UI for motion lights. And he wrote that, and I took it and kind of wrangled it a bit, and had exactly what I wanted to do. So it's very good to see that in, the examples through actual proper use.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I think the examples that the community is providing, like all the time, like people open sourcing the configuration, is actually something that's really powerful. The GitHub has added topics to repositories, so you can actually search for Home Assistant config, and you see tons of repositories with just like people sharing their configuration and like great examples. And Carlos' repository is always a good example because he also has like a README with like all the things that he built and like where in the configuration you can find it.
Yeah, his repo is just unbelievable. I've definitely been referencing that a lot.
Yeah, he puts a lot of time in it. It's really great to see.
Yeah, I think last time I looked, he had something like 700 commits.
Wow.
Which is just, mind-blowing. All right. I think that's probably a good place to leave it if we don't have anything else.
All good for me.
Yeah, no, I'm all good.
All right. Thanks, guys, for coming on. And, of course, thanks to our listeners as well. Keep that feedback coming in to feedback@haspodcast.io. I am responding to every piece of feedback we receive. And it's good to, connect with people that are listening, find out what they want from us and things like that. So it's great. And as always, we'll be back in 2 weeks. And until then, we'll see you on Discord.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.